Someone has been living beneath Paris for 80 years. And they're still writing in the logbook. I need you to sit with that sentence for a moment. Not a decade. Not a generation. 80 years. Continuous occupation of a space that, according to every official map, every municipal record, every geological survey conducted by the Inspection Générale des Carrières, does not exist. A space where furniture has been arranged into rooms. Where electricity hums through wires that no one authorized. Where the air smells not of limestone and ancient death, but of coffee. Of cooked food. Of human habitation so sustained and so deliberate that it has become its own kind of civilization. And at the center of it all, a logbook. Ordinary. Leather-bound. The kind you could buy in any stationery shop in the 6th arrondissement. Except this one begins with an entry dated November 14, 1943. The handwriting is steady. The ink has faded to a pale brown. And the entries do not stop. They continue through the liberation of Paris. Through the Cold War. Through May of 1968. Through the fall of the Berlin Wall. Through 9/11. Through COVID. The final entry is dated September 3, 2022. The handwriting in that last entry is different from the first. But the format is the same. The language is the same. The purpose, whatever it is, has not changed in 8 decades. This is the story of what was found beneath Paris. Not the Paris you visit. Not the Paris of croissants and café au lait and the Eiffel Tower shimmering at midnight. This is about the other Paris. The one that breathes below your feet when you walk along the Seine, the one that hums and whispers and has been keeping its own records long before you arrived and will continue long after you leave. And I should warn you now, the deeper we go into this, the less comfortable the explanations become. To understand what was discovered in 2023, you first need to understand what exists beneath the streets of Paris, because most people have a deeply incomplete picture. They know about the catacombs. They've seen the photographs, stacked skulls, femurs arranged in decorative crosses, the romantic macabre of the empire of the dead. What they don't realize is that the tourist section, the part you can visit for €14 on a Tuesday afternoon, represents approximately 0.7% of the total underground network. Beneath Paris lies roughly 300 kilometers of tunnel. That's 186 miles. Carved over centuries, beginning in the Roman era and expanding massively in the Middle Ages, when limestone was quarried to build the very city that sits above. By the 18th century, the quarries were so extensive and so poorly mapped that entire neighborhoods began collapsing into the earth. Buildings would simply vanish overnight, swallowed by the ground they stood on. In 1774, a section of what is now the Avenue d'Entre-Chochereau dropped 30 feet into a void no one knew was there. The French government created the Inspection Générale des Carrières, the IGC, in 1777 to map and reinforce these tunnels. They've been doing it ever since. And in 246 years, they have not finished. There are sections of the underground that have never been surveyed. Passages that appear on no map. Rooms that were sealed in the 19th century and never reopened. And within this vast, dark, unmapped labyrinth, an entire subculture has existed for decades. They call themselves cataphiles, lovers of the below. They enter through manholes, through cracks in building basements, through forgotten sewer junctions. They paint murals on the walls. They throw parties in caverns. They know the tunnels the way you know your own neighborhood. But even the most experienced cataphiles will tell you there are places they don't go. Sections where the usual graffiti stops. Where the air changes. Where the tunnels narrow and then open into spaces that feel intentional. Designed. Lived in. And it was in one of these spaces that a man known online only as Etienne made the discovery that would eventually draw the attention of authorities, journalists, and a very specific kind of fear. Etienne, and I'm using the pseudonym he chose for himself, had been exploring the catacombs for 11 years when he began a solo expedition in late January 2023. He entered through an access point in the 14th arrondissement, one he'd used dozens of times before. His plan was a relatively standard route, south through the GRS tunnels, west under the boulevard, then a loop back through a set of passages he'd partially mapped the previous year. He carried 2 flashlights, a backup battery pack, a first aid kit, 1.5 liters of water, a camera, and a GPS device that he knew would be functionally useless once he descended below a certain depth. What happened in the first 3 hours of his expedition was unremarkable. He documented his progress the way he always did, short video clips, whispered narration, occasional photographs of interesting geological formations. The tunnels were dry. The temperature was a steady 14 degrees Celsius. He encountered the usual evidence of other explorers: faded spray paint, the occasional discarded water bottle, a torn sleeping bag that had been there long enough to develop a patina of limestone dust. And then he reached a junction he didn't recognize. This is where things begin to deviate from any exploration he'd conducted before. Etienne had been through this section of the tunnels at least 6 times. He was familiar with every branch, every dead end, every landmark. But at a point approximately 1.2 kilometers south of his entry, he found a passage that, according to his own maps, should not have been there. The wall that had previously existed, solid limestone, unbroken, now had an opening. Not a crack or a natural erosion. An opening with clean edges. Someone had removed a section of wall, and they had done it recently enough that the cut stone still bore the pale color of fresh limestone rather than the gray-brown patina of aged surfaces. He stood at the entrance of this new passage for 3 minutes. He recorded the video. His breathing is audible. He does not speak. And then he goes in. The passage extended approximately 40 meters before opening into a room. Not a cavern. Not a widening of the tunnel. A room. Roughly 4 meters by 5 meters, with a ceiling that had been leveled, actually chiseled flat, at a height of about 2.2 meters. In this room, there was a table. A chair. A shelf carved directly into the limestone wall, holding what appeared to be canned food. And a single electric light, connected to a wire that disappeared into the wall. The light was on. I want to be very specific about this because it becomes important later. The light was functioning when Etienne entered the room. It was not a battery-powered lantern or a chemical light stick. It was a standard LED bulb, wired into what appeared to be a proper electrical circuit. Someone had run power to this room. In the catacombs. In a section of tunnel that officially does not exist. Etienne documented everything. He photographed the table, which bore scratches and stains consistent with years of use. He photographed the canned goods, which included brands that had been discontinued in the 1990s alongside others with expiration dates in 2024. He photographed the chair, which was a simple wooden design, handmade, with joints that showed the kind of wear that comes from decades of someone sitting in the same seat. And then he found the second room. Beyond the first room, through another deliberately cut passage, was a second space roughly twice the size. This one had been furnished more extensively. 2 cots with thin mattresses. A small bookshelf holding perhaps 30 volumes, mostly in French, a few in German. A basin carved into a natural depression in the floor, connected to a water source that Etienne could hear but not see, a pipe, running somewhere behind the walls, feeding clean water into a space 20 meters below the streets of Paris. There was a small cooking apparatus, a butane stove, and beside it, neatly stacked, a set of ceramic plates and metal utensils. This was not a campsite. This was not the temporary refuge of a homeless person or the hangout of cataphile teenagers. This was a dwelling. Someone had built a home down here, with the patience and care of someone who intended to stay. Etienne found 7 rooms in total. 7 rooms, connected by short passages, arranged in a pattern that suggested deliberate planning. One room appeared to be a food storage area. Another held clothing, mostly utilitarian, mostly dark color, hung on hooks driven into the limestone. A third contained what Etienne described as a workshop, with hand tools, rolls of wire, and components he couldn't immediately identify. A fourth room was almost empty, save for a single chair facing a blank wall, and this room disturbed him more than any of the others, though he couldn't articulate why. But it was the deepest chamber, the seventh room, the farthest from the entrance, accessible only through a passage so narrow Etienne had to turn sideways to fit, that contained the discovery. A wooden desk, older than anything else he'd encountered. A kerosene lamp, unlit but still containing fuel. And on the desk, the logbook. He opened it. The first entry was written in French. The date was November 14, 1943. Paris had been under German occupation for 3 years. The entry was brief, just a few sentences, and Etienne translated it roughly on camera, his voice barely above a whisper. "We are below now. The entrance is sealed. God willing, they will not find us. There are 9. There are 9. The implications of that sentence, in that place, in that year, are not difficult to parse. November 1943. Paris under Nazi occupation. The roundups. The deportations. The Vel d'Hiv. The trains to Auschwitz. Someone, 9 people, had gone underground. Literally underground. Into the tunnels beneath the city, into the quarries, into the darkness, to survive. This in itself would not be entirely unprecedented. There are documented cases of resistance fighters using the catacombs. The French resistance maintained a headquarters in the tunnels during the occupation. But the documented cases involved temporary use, hiding weapons, conducting meetings, passing through. What the logbook describes is something different. What the logbook describes is permanent habitation. The entries from the 1940s are sparse. They document supplies, how much food remained, when water needed to be fetched, the condition of the air. They mention the cold. They mention the darkness. They do not mention names. Throughout the entire logbook, not a single entry includes a proper name. The residents are referred to by numbers. The first entry says 9. Later entries mention 3 or 7 or the new one. But never names. The entries continue through 1944. Through June. Through August. You might expect them to stop after the liberation of Paris. The city was free. The occupation was over. They could come back to the surface. But the entries do not stop. The entry for September 2, 1944, the day after the formal German surrender in Paris, reads, and I am translating loosely from Etienne's footage, "We have heard. We do not go up. It is not finished. It is not finished." What did they mean? The war was over. Paris was free. What was not finished? The entries from the late 1940s become less frequent but more detailed. They describe expansion, new rooms being carved from the limestone. They describe improvements, better ventilation, new water sources, the first mention of electrical wiring, tapped from a municipal line somewhere above. They describe a routine that had crystallized into something self-sustaining. And they describe something else. Something that Etienne initially translated as the work or the project. References to it appear every few entries, always oblique, never explained. The work continues. Progress on the project. 3 believes we are close. Close to what? The entries from the 1950s introduce a troubling element. The number of residents changes. It goes down, 6 now, and it goes up, a new one has come. People leave. People arrive. But the logbook never explains how. It never describes the process by which someone joins this underground community. It simply notes their presence or their absence. And in 1957, there is an entry that Etienne read on camera and then stopped recording for several minutes. When he resumed, he was visibly shaken, though he did not explain why. The entry, as best as can be reconstructed from his later descriptions, referenced a removal. Not a departure. A removal. And the word used, Etienne was insistent about this, was not the French word for someone leaving. It was the word for something being taken away. An object. Not a person. The entries from the 1960s are where the logbook begins to feel less like a survival diary and more like something else entirely. The references to the work become more frequent. There are mentions of materials being brought down from the surface, specific materials, including electronics, books on subjects that Etienne could not identify from the brief descriptions, and, in one entry from 1968, recordings. Audio recordings, possibly, though the entry does not specify. May 1968. Paris is tearing itself apart above ground. Students and workers are building barricades. Millions are on strike. The country is on the verge of revolution. And beneath the streets, someone writes, the noise above is useful. We have expanded the Eastern Passage. No one notices. They were using the chaos above to dig. The entries from the 1970s through the 1990s follow a pattern that becomes, in its own way, more disturbing than any individual revelation. They are consistent. Methodical. The tone never changes. The format never changes. But the handwriting does, subtly at first, then unmistakably. By the 1980s, the handwriting is clearly not the same hand that wrote the first entries in 1943. Which means one of two things: either the original writer taught someone else to continue the log, or the original writer died and was replaced by someone who adopted the same role with the same dedication. Either way, the project continued. The work continued. Whatever was happening in those 7 rooms, and in whatever additional spaces might exist beyond them, did not stop. And then we reached the 2000s. And the entries become strange in a new way. There are references to the internet. To specific websites. To events happening on the surface that are described with a familiarity that suggests someone in the group has regular access to the world above. There is an entry from September 12, 2001, the day after September 11, that reads simply, "It confirms." That is the entire entry. 2 words. It confirms. What does it confirm? The logbook does not say. There are 5 things about the logbook that nobody has been able to explain. The first is the continuity. 80 years of entries without a single gap longer than 2 weeks. Whatever this group is, whatever its purpose, it has maintained an unbroken chain of documentation for 8 decades. That kind of institutional memory requires structure. It requires rules. It requires commitment that goes beyond any individual. The second is the absence of names. Not a single name in 80 years. This is not carelessness. This is operational security. Whoever maintains this logbook has been trained, or has trained themselves, to leave no identifying information. The entries describe events, supplies, progress, but never identities. The third is the electrical infrastructure. Running power to a location 20 meters underground, in a tunnel that appears on no map, requires either access to municipal systems or an independent power source. Either option implies resources and technical knowledge that go far beyond what a small group of survivors or eccentrics would typically possess. The fourth is the food. The canned goods on the shelf span decades. Items from the 1990s sat alongside items from the 2020s. This suggests not a single stockpile but a continuous resupply operation. Someone has been bringing food into these tunnels regularly for years. Possibly for decades. The fifth is the sealed passages. Etienne noted that at least 3 of the passages he encountered had been deliberately sealed at some point and then reopened. The stone used to seal them matched the surrounding limestone, suggesting whoever closed them had gone to considerable effort to make the seals look natural. These were not barricades against intruders. These were camouflage. Someone was hiding the entrances to spaces they intended to return to. Etienne spent approximately 4 hours in the hidden complex before his nerve broke and he returned to the surface. He uploaded a portion of his footage to a private forum used by cataphiles, seeking confirmation that he had not simply stumbled into a well-known but undocumented squat. The response he received was immediate and, from what I've been able to determine, unprecedented in its intensity. 3 senior members of the cataphile community, people with decades of combined experience in the tunnels, contacted him privately within hours. All 3 said the same thing. First, they had heard rumors of permanent habitation in this section of the tunnels for years but had never found evidence. Second, the electrical wiring Etienne photographed was not consistent with the improvised setups typically used by cataphiles. It was professional. Properly insulated. Run through conduits. Third, they urged him, in the strongest possible terms, not to go back. The reason for their warning was not, as you might expect, concern for his safety in a structural sense. It was not about cave-ins or getting lost or running out of light. It was about what happens when you attract the attention of people who have chosen to live underground for 80 years and have apparently succeeded in doing so without being discovered. People who have maintained operational security so tight that not a single name has leaked in 8 decades. People who sealed and unsealed passages at will, who tapped into municipal power lines, who had someone capable of writing logbook entries in 2022 with the same disciplined format as entries from 1943. These are not people who would react casually to being found. Etienne did not listen to the warnings. He went back 3 weeks later. And what he found on his second visit is where this story takes a turn that I am still trying to make sense of. The entrance he had used before, the freshly cut passage through the limestone wall, was gone. Sealed. Not with a temporary barricade but with a block of limestone that had been fitted so precisely into the opening that, had he not known exactly where to look, he would never have found it. He ran his fingers along the edges. The seams were almost invisible. Whoever had done this was skilled. They had tools. And they had done it in the 3 weeks since his first visit. He spent 2 hours searching for an alternative entrance. He found one, approximately 200 meters north of the original, hidden behind what appeared to be a natural rock fall but which, upon closer inspection, was a deliberately constructed pile of stones arranged to look natural. Behind it was a passage, narrower than the first, leading in the direction of the rooms he had previously discovered. He followed it. And after about 90 meters, he entered a space he had not seen before. An 8th room. Larger than the others. And empty. Completely empty. No furniture. No supplies. No logbook. The walls had been scrubbed. The floor had been swept. The carved shelves were bare. Even the electrical wiring had been removed, leaving only small holes where it had been anchored to the stone. They had cleared out. In 3 weeks, whoever had been living in those 7 rooms had packed up 80 years of habitation and moved. But moved where? Deeper. That was the only possibility. Deeper into the 300 kilometers of tunnel that spread beneath Paris like the root system of some vast, dark tree. Etienne found one item in the 8th room. A single sheet of paper, placed in the center of the floor, weighed down by a small stone. On it was written a single sentence in French. He translated it on camera, and his voice, when he spoke it, was barely audible. You should not have come back. He left the tunnels immediately. He did not return. He deleted his original posts from the Cataphile forum, though screenshots had already been saved and circulated. He stopped responding to messages. His online presence went silent. As of the research for this video, Etienne has not posted anything publicly in 7 months. But the story does not end with his silence. Because what he found, and what he shared, however briefly, reached people beyond the cataphile community. It reached journalists. It reached historians. And it reached the IGC, the Inspection Générale des Carrières, the official body responsible for everything beneath the streets of Paris. And what the IGC did next is perhaps the most unsettling part of this entire story. Within 2 months of Etienne's discovery becoming semi-public knowledge, the IGC sealed off 3 new sections of the catacombs. This is not in itself unusual, they periodically restrict access to areas for structural reasons. But these 3 sections shared a specific characteristic. All 3 were adjacent to the area where Etienne had found the hidden rooms. All 3 had been previously accessible to cataphiles for years without incident. And all 3 were sealed not with the usual metal grates or warning signs, but with poured concrete. Permanent. Impassable. No official explanation was given. When a reporter from Le Monde inquired about the closures, the IGC responded with a single sentence: routine maintenance and structural reinforcement. When pressed for details, which sections, what structural concerns, when would they reopen, the IGC did not respond. I want to introduce a piece of context here that I think is critical and that most people covering this story have overlooked. In 2004, police discovered a fully functional cinema in the catacombs. Not a projector and a sheet. A cinema. Carved out of the rock, with a full-size screen, seating for 20, a bar, a restaurant area, and a telephone line. It was powered by a professional electrical system. When police returned 3 days later to investigate further, everything had been removed. The projector, the screen, the seating, the bar, all gone. And in its place, a note. It read, "Do not try to find us." The similarities between the 2004 cinema discovery and Etienne's 2023 discovery are striking enough to warrant serious consideration. In both cases, a sophisticated underground installation was found by outsiders. In both cases, the installation demonstrated technical capabilities far beyond casual squatting. In both cases, the inhabitants responded by clearing out with impossible speed and thoroughness. And in both cases, they left a message, brief, direct, and carrying the unmistakable tone of people who are not afraid, but who are warning you to be. The question that has consumed me in the months I've spent researching this story is not who these people are. It's what they're doing. Because the logbook, the entries that Etienne captured on camera before the complex was cleared, tells a story that goes beyond survival. The early entries, from 1943, are consistent with hiding. But the entries from the 1950s onward describe something that sounds less like hiding and more like a purpose. A project. Work that has continued, uninterrupted, for 80 years. 3 theories have emerged from the community of researchers and cataphiles who have studied Etienne's footage. The first theory is historical. The original 9 residents were people fleeing the Nazi occupation, likely Jewish, possibly resistance fighters, possibly both. They went underground with the intention of waiting out the war. But the war ended, and they didn't come back up. Why? Because the community they had built underground had become its own world. Because they had seen what the surface was capable of, and they chose not to return. Over decades, they recruited new members, people who, for whatever reason, preferred the permanence and silence of the tunnels to the chaos above. This theory is the most comforting and, I think, the least complete. It doesn't explain the technical infrastructure. It doesn't explain the operational security. And it doesn't explain the logbook's references to the work. The second theory is political. The group is, or was, connected to the French resistance, and its continuation represents a kind of deep state contingency, a network maintained in secret, capable of operating independently of the surface government, ready to be activated in the event of another occupation or catastrophic failure of the state. This theory is supported by the group's apparent access to resources, their discipline, and the IGC's response to the discovery, which looked less like routine maintenance and more like a cover-up. But it raises its own questions. If this is a government-sanctioned operation, why would they leave a logbook? And why would the IGC seal the tunnels with concrete rather than simply posting guards? The third theory is the one that keeps me awake. And it's the one that fits the evidence most closely, even though I don't fully understand what it implies. The logbook's references to the work are not vague in the way of casual diary entries. They are vague in the way of technical documentation, deliberately obscured to prevent comprehension by outsiders, but precise enough to be useful to insiders. The mentions of specific materials, electronics, recordings, books on unidentified subjects, these suggest a research program. A long-term, multi-generational research program conducted in absolute secrecy, 20 meters below the streets of one of the most surveilled cities in Europe. What kind of research requires 80 years of continuous effort, complete isolation from the surface, and security so tight that the researchers don't even use their own names? I don't have an answer. But I want to draw your attention to something that Etienne captured on camera in the fourth room, the nearly empty one, with just a single chair facing a blank wall. He panned his camera across that wall slowly, and in the footage, which has been enhanced by several people since its brief public appearance, you can see something on the limestone surface. Faint marks. Not graffiti. Not carvings. They appear to be measurements. Hundreds of them. Tiny lines and numbers, covering the wall from floor to ceiling, as if someone had been tracking something, recording data, over a very long period of time. The numbers are too small to read in the footage, and the wall has since been sealed behind poured concrete. One of the cataphiles who contacted Etienne after his first visit told him something that he repeated in a private conversation that was later shared with a small group of researchers. This cataphile, who had been exploring the tunnel since the 1980s, said that in 1997, he had been in a section of the tunnels near where Etienne made his discovery. He had gotten disoriented, turned around in a passage he thought he knew, and ended up in a section he'd never seen before. He described hearing something. Not voices. Not footsteps. A sound he couldn't identify. A low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat, but mechanical. Coming from beneath him. From below the floor of the tunnel. Which meant whatever was producing it was in a space deeper than the tunnels themselves. He left. He told no one at the time. And when Etienne's footage surfaced, he recognized the location immediately. There is one more detail that I feel compelled to include, even though I cannot verify it independently, and I want to be transparent about that. In the weeks after Etienne's footage circulated, a user on a French-language forum claiming to be a former employee of the IGC posted a series of comments before their account was deleted. The user claimed that the IGC had been aware of permanent habitation in the sections Etienne explored since at least the 1970s. They claimed that the IGC had an informal policy regarding these inhabitants: do not engage, do not map their spaces, do not discuss. The user claimed that this policy came not from within the IGC but from above, a term they did not elaborate on. And they claimed that the reason the IGC sealed the 3 new sections with concrete was not to keep cataphiles out. It was to keep whatever was down there in. I cannot verify this. I include it because it is consistent with the other evidence, and because the account was deleted within hours of the comments being posted, which is, at minimum, notable. So let me lay out what we know. What we can verify from Etienne's footage, from the cataphile community's response, and from the IGC's documented actions. We know that a network of at least 7 deliberately constructed rooms exists in an unmapped section of the Parisian underground. We know that these rooms contain furniture, supplies, and functioning electrical infrastructure. We know that a logbook documenting continuous habitation from 1943 to 2022 was found in the deepest room. We know that the inhabitants cleared out within 3 weeks of being discovered, with a speed and thoroughness that suggests extensive planning for exactly this contingency. We know they left a warning. We know the IGC sealed 3 adjacent sections with permanent concrete barriers. And we know that the one person who found all of this has gone completely silent. What we do not know is who they are. What we do not know is what the work refers to. What we do not know is what was on that wall of measurements. What we do not know is what produces that low, rhythmic pulse beneath the tunnel floor. And what we do not know is whether the concrete barriers were meant to keep us out or keep something else contained. The catacombs of Paris extend for 300 kilometers. The sections that have been sealed represent a fraction of that distance. Whatever exists down there, whoever exists down there, has had 80 years to dig, to expand, to go deeper. They've survived the Nazis. They've survived the Cold War. They've survived being found. And based on every piece of evidence available, they are still down there. Right now. Below the cafes and the bookshops and the tourists photographing the same. Writing in the logbook. There is a concept in architecture called a palimpsest, a structure that has been built upon, erased, and rebuilt so many times that it contains layers of meaning that no single reading can fully capture. Paris is a palimpsest. The city you see is only the most recent layer. Beneath it lie Roman ruins, medieval quarries, plague pits, Revolution-era tunnels, wartime bunkers, Cold War infrastructure. And beneath all of that, apparently, something else. Something that has been writing its own history for 80 years, in a leather-bound logbook, in the dark. The final entry. September 3, 2022. The handwriting is neat. Controlled. The entry is 4 words long, and it is the only entry in the entire logbook that is not written in French. It is written in Latin. Opus non dum perfectum est. The work is not yet finished. The city of Paris conducts vibration monitoring in certain sections of the underground to track structural stability. In March 2023, approximately 6 weeks after Etienne's second visit, 3 vibration sensors in the 14th arrondissement recorded anomalous readings. The readings were consistent with rhythmic, low-frequency percussion, not traffic, not construction, not geological settling. The sensors recorded the anomaly for approximately 45 minutes before it stopped. The readings were flagged, reviewed, and then reclassified as equipment malfunction. All 3 sensors. Simultaneously. I think about the logbook entry from 1944. We have heard. We do not go up. It is not finished. And I think about the entry from 2001. It confirms. And I think about the final entry, in Latin, a language of scholarship and ritual and things meant to endure across centuries. The work is not yet finished. What kind of work takes 80 years and still isn't done? What kind of work requires you to live in the dark, to abandon your name, to build a civilization beneath a civilization? What kind of work makes you look at the liberation of Paris and say, it is not finished, look at 9/11 and say, it confirms, and look at your 80th year underground and write, in the language of the ancients, that you are not yet done? I don't know. And I'm not sure the answer, if it ever comes, will be something any of us are prepared to hear. But I do know this, the tunnels are still there. The concrete barriers are still in place. And somewhere beneath the 14th arrondissement, in a space that appears on no map, behind walls that have been sealed and reopened and sealed again, the air still hums with electricity that no one authorized, and the faint smell of coffee drifts through passages carved from 200-year-old limestone. Someone is still down there. And they've been expecting us to find them. The logbook makes that clear. The warning makes that clear. The speed with which they vanished makes that clear. They have a protocol for this. They've planned for discovery. They've planned for the surface world to come knocking. And their plan, apparently, is to go deeper. To seal the way behind them. To leave a message, brief, direct, unafraid, and to continue. You should not have come back. Not go away. Not leave us alone. You should not have come back. Past tense. A statement of fact. A record for the logbook. You were warned, and you did not listen, and now this entrance is closed to you forever. They've been writing for 80 years. They've been recording the progress of something we can't see, in a language of numbers and careful omission. They've been watching the surface, they know about the internet, about global events, about the chaos above, and they have chosen, again and again, to stay below. And the work is not yet finished. One last thing. In the cataphile community, there is a phrase that experienced explorers use when they encounter a section of tunnel that feels wrong, where the air is different, where the graffiti stops, where some instinct tells you to turn around. They call it le souffle, the breath. Because, they say, the tunnels breathe. The temperature differentials between the surface and the underground create air currents that move through the passages like exhalations. And when you feel a breath where there shouldn't be one, in a dead-end passage, in a sealed section, in a place with no connection to the surface, it means there is a space beyond the wall. An opening you can't see. A room where someone, or something, is displacing air. Etienne reported feeling le souffle in the passage leading to the 8th room. The empty room. The one they had cleaned out and left bare, save for a single sheet of paper. Which means the passage didn't end there. Beyond that room, beyond that wall, there was more. There is more. Spaces he never reached. Rooms he never saw. An infrastructure that extends further than anyone on the surface has ever documented. 80 years. 300 kilometers of tunnels. A logbook with no names. A warning left for anyone who comes looking. And somewhere in the dark, the work continues. Paris breathes. And beneath the breath, someone is counting. What do you think is really happening beneath Paris? Is this an unbroken chain of survivors from World War II? A secret government operation that's been running for decades? Or something else entirely, something the logbook describes but never names? Leave your theory below. Because the more I look at this, the more I think the answer isn't something we'll find in the tunnels. I think the answer is something the tunnels are trying to keep us from reaching. And maybe that warning wasn't a threat. Maybe it was a kindness.